Welcome, welcome. Hi, Samuel and Gavin.
Salam, Mamasi.
And welcome everyone in the comments. Good morning.
Hello.
Right. So, firstly, we will start with an introduction. So, welcome everybody. Please feel free to like and subscribe. Today we have a debate on did the resurrection really happen? Our interlocutors are Gavin Hurleyman and Samuel TAWHID. Gavin Hurleyman is taking the positive position of the resurrection did happen, and Samuel TAWHID is taking the negative of the resurrection did not happen. The format of the debate is 10 minutes opening statements each, followed by 40 minutes open discussion, followed by 5 minutes closing statements each. Then questions and answers from the audience. So please feel free to ask any questions as the debate unfolds in the live chat, and I will collect them to put to the interlocutors at the time of the Q&A round. I'll now pass it over to Gavin Hurleyman to give a brief introduction about himself. Over to you, Gavin.
Okay, thanks. Hello, everyone. My name is Gavin. I live in New Zealand, which is way down the bottom of the earth, kind of in line with Australia, but not that far from Antarctica. If you start swimming south from New Zealand, eventually you'll hit the ice of Antarctica. There's nothing between us, just ocean. I just want to say thanks for Dwayne for hosting and modding this event, and a big hat tip to Samuel. Now, here's the thing. I know Samuel's an atheist, and he's an arch atheist. He's really hard line. But I have a lot of respect for Samuel because of all the atheists that I know, and I can honestly say this, he's the only atheist that I know that goes into Muslim rooms or Muslim chats and gives it to the Muslims like they live. There's no other atheist that I know, particularly on Clubhouse, that has the courage to do that. So I'm sure there's going to be atheists in the chat watching. Please take note of how Samuel conducts himself because you could learn a lot. So I'm really looking forward to a good, fruitful debate. We've debated once before, and I think this is going to be a really good debate. So thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that introduction, Gavin. I'll now pass it over to Samuel to give a brief introduction about himself. Over to you, Samuel.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Gavin. Yeah, I do go into Christian rooms and say Shaitan al-Masih from time to time, and I think Christians are going over the board. I don't like all Christians. I do like you, however, and thank you so much for that. As long as we can be respectful to each other, I think that's fine. As you noted, you said most of my time is spent on debating Muslims, and I have to say that yes, there are actually other atheists out there that do talk to Muslims too. Not that much as they like to talk about Christianity. I have seen that. I don't know why. It seems like most of the atheists love to go against Christianity, but as soon as you say something about Islam, they tend to turn a blind eye. They feel uncomfortable. So that's true. I think it's a shame. But the reason why I wanted this debate to happen was because naturally I do go into Christian rooms a lot and talk with Christians about Islam, with other Muslims, and debating them. And they always ask me the question like, "Oh, why don't you believe in Christianity?" and blah blah blah. So I thought this was a good opportunity for me to uh, pose my objections towards Christianity and why I don't think it's true. One of them, of course, is the resurrection of Jesus. So I'm thankful for this debate. Yes, and I live on the opposite around the globe, right, from you, Gavin. I live in the northern hemisphere, the northern hemisphere. Uh, let's put it somewhere in Scandinavia. That's all you're gonna get. Um, yeah,
Cool.
yep.
That's fine.
So, yeah. Yeah, it's literally at the opposite of where you live. Just kind of cool. But yeah, so um, that's me.
Thank you, Samuel, for that introduction. And just to inform everyone, all references that Gavin and Samuel have provided can be accessed on request. So now we'll begin the opening statement rounds, starting with Gavin Hurleyman as he has taken the positive position. So, firstly, Gavin, would you like a time reminder?
Yeah, I've got a timer. Thanks, Dwayne. But if you can just give me a shout out with 2 minutes to go, because sometimes I lose track of time.
2
That
minutes
would
to
be
go, yes?
helpful. Just 2 minutes to go. Yeah, just yell out 2 minutes.
Yep,
That'd be
no
great.
problem. I'll tell you when to go, mate. I'll just set this timer.
Yeah, man.
Right, ready when you are.
All right. Okay, let's get cracking. We've only got 10 minutes, and there is so much material. It's going to be hard to cover everything. So we're going to be looking at, well, from my side, we're going to be looking at the resurrection using the same method that professional historians and scholars use, which has the most boring name called the historical method. But we are going to be looking at the 5 criteria involved in the historical method, which is 1, early attestation; 2, individual, multiple, and most importantly, enemy attestation. Number 3 is the criterion of embarrassment. Number 4 is the criterion of coherence. And lastly is number 5, the criterion of archaeological evidence. All right, so let's get going. So the historicity of the resurrection is firmly rooted in the reliability of the New Testament documents. Unlike other historical recorded events, the Bible was penned by men who were inspired by God, the creator of the universe and life. Now, what we have with the Bible, we have 1,500 odd years and 40 plus authors who were witnesses to Christ, and the manuscript evidence preserved by these who were entrusted with the revelations. I'm having a bit of trouble here with the light because it's like 9 p.m. at night down here. Anyway, we'll do our best. We've got archaeological evidence offering historical accuracy. We've got multiple eyewitnesses, but more importantly, we've got many, many enemy eyewitnesses, and that's gold. That is really gold. Because if you've got enemies of your faith or your movement, or even of yourself, and your enemy says that yeah, you actually did do something, that's you can put that in the bank as being true. We've got corroborating evidence. Corroborating accounts. Prophetic consistency. I hope we can get into that. We've got expert scrutiny, leader acceptance, global influence, and finally, and this is the most important thing, is that because that tomb was empty on the Sunday morning and Jesus appeared to his followers, we have lives that have been changed for the better. For the better. So it's safe to say that it is universally accepted by most religious and secular historians. When I say most, Muslims don't accept this, but that's why I had to say most. Most religious and secular historians believe that Jesus died by crucifixion in Jerusalem on the Passover Friday in either 30 or 33 AD. And from that fledgling, tiny little band of followers of Christ, there are now 2.6 billion Christians on the planet. And that is projected to rise to 3.3 billion over the next 30 years. So 3.3 billion is 34.4% of the global planet's population, which is not bad. It's not all bells and whistles though, because Islam has higher birth rate, and over the next 30 years, Islam will slowly catch up to Christianity, and by 2050, 2060 will be almost as popular a religion as Christianity is, but not quite. It'll just be a few percentage points short. So all the affirmations about the resurrection come from the primary source evidence, which is the pages of the Bible. For the purposes of this debate, we will be appealing to the internal evidence inside the Bible. But hopefully, and I really hope we have time for this, I'd like to cover off the external evidence, or what's colloquially called the extra biblical evidence for the resurrection. So this is information and details outside of the Bible that affirm the resurrection. So let's begin by identifying that the method of reasoning we will be using is called the inductive method of reasoning, which provides a likelihood of the truth of the conclusion provided the premises are true, and that the conclusion, and in this case the resurrection is our conclusion, is highly, highly likely to be true. That's very, very difficult when we're talking about things that happened 3,000, 2,000, even 1,000 years ago, to get empirical evidence. So this is why we appeal to the inductive method. So let's look at the premises. Okay, we've got early attestation, we've got multiple individual and enemy eyewitness accounts, we've got the criterion of embarrassment, we've got the criterion of coherence, and finally the criterion of archaeological evidence. So premise one, early attestation. This criterion is an important validation of a historical event, because the earlier a record of a said event is made, the more likely that record is to be considered to be correct and true, because not enough time has developed for myth or embellishment to sort of infiltrate the narrative. So the closer a record is made to an actual event, the more value it has. And with the resurrection, there is actually no consensus, believe it or not. There's no strong consensus amongst scholars as to how early the earliest evidence of the resurrection was recorded. But it's a hell of a lot shorter time than some of the works like of Herodotus and Suetonius and Tacitus. They've got time periods of 1,300 years between the original copies and the first copies we have today. 800 years for Suetonius, and 1,100 years for Tacitus. But if we look at what Christianity has to offer as far as early attestation is concerned, we can see that Christianity has what's called an early pre-Pauline creed, and that's found in 1 Corinthians 15 verses 3 through 7, and it's dated to be very early after the crucifixion and the resurrection. And like I said, there's no universal or exact dating consensus with this document. I'll give you an example of the difference in dating. New Testament biblical scholar James D.G. Dunn, he states that this pre-Pauline creed, we can be entirely confident, he writes, was formulated as a tradition within months of Jesus' death. But then we've got atheist New Testament scholar Notice I said atheist. Atheist New Testament scholar, German Gerd Ludemann, who states that the elements in the tradition are to be dated to the first 2 years after the crucifixion and no longer than 3 years after the death of Jesus. So there we've got a difference of a few months to, up to 3 years. But it's still very short. It's still very short compared with
Two
the
minutes
other.
remaining.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Still very short when we consider it against other well accepted manuscripts like those of Herodotus, Suetonius, and Tacitus. Next, Christianity has what's called the pre-Markan Passion narrative that refers to an early source that Mark used when he was formulating the Passion story of Christ. This account had to be written somewhere between 30 to 33 AD and no later than 37 AD because, as German Catholic theologian Father Rudolf Pesch writes, the Markan text implies that Caiaphas was the Jewish high priest at the time of the crucifixion and the resurrection. When the narrative began to be circulated, um, if the narrative had been penned after Caiaphas's term of office, which ran from 18 AD to 37 AD, his name would have had to be used to distinguish him from any other high priest who succeeded him, but he's the only high priest mentioned. So this points to the account being written between or within the first 4 to 7 years. So that's still very short after the resurrection. Then we've got Christianity also has the Gospel of Q or QL, which in German just means source. As South African priest and theologian Father Patrick Harton writes, although an exact date is difficult to determine, a date of 50 AD would seem to be the most acceptable period for the written Q source to emerge, which would make it one of the first Christian writings to appear, just a mere 20 years or maybe 17 or 18 years after the event.
Time.
Okay,
I don't
all
know
right.
if you want to
That's
carry
fine.
on
That's fine.
or.
I'll yield there. No, I'll yield there. I'll be fine. Thanks.
Right, I'll just reset the timer and I'll let you know, Samuel, for your
Sure.
10 minutes open.
All right, let's get this going.
Right, ready when you are, Samuel.
All right, let's get it going. I'm ready. Start.
Start.
So the arguments I will be using will be followed: the history, the Bible, the tomb, the outside sources, the witnesses, and then the supernatural claims. So I written it down so I could um, put it all together. Now, granted, there is much more to say about this than 10 minutes can give a justification for, but let's go. So, the history of Christianity is sprung out of turbulence in the Roman Empire and the split of the Jewish faith. Bart Ehrman, in the debate with Justin Baz, did Jesus of Nazareth rise from the dead? At 25 minutes 50 seconds in, explains the faith of the apocalyptic Jew. Uh, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he says that they don't believe in body and soul after death. He says that the soul comes to the body and only God can do so. So, uh, in that sense, the only way you can become resurrected is from God. And since Jesus was already believed to be the Messiah, uh, hence, therefore, they say that the Messiah has risen. So apocalyptic Jews believes in a new form of eschatology, uh, uh, and they imagine life after death in a bodily existence. Now, on the website of pbs.org, cited about the apocalyptic Jews, it says, and this is a long citation, but It's a good one. It says, some people then left Jerusalem entirely. This is what the Essence group seems to have done. They moved off to the Dead Sea from the pure to form a pure priestly community until such time that the Messiah would come, recapture the temple, and restore it to its purity. So they're really looking forward to a time when the force of God will take Jerusalem once again. Then it continues. The essence were the only such new voices of protest and expectation at this time. We hear quite a number of others, some of them calling for different kinds of religious reform and different kinds of ways of looking at the hope of Israel. And two of the best known figures of this period are John the Baptist and Jesus, both of whom come out of this early, very Jewish Catholic tradition. And then it asks the question: does the New Testament itself reflect this period of reevaluation? And it says, in a similar way, the early Christians, who at this point in time are larger, still within a larger framework of Judaism, also have to reinterpret the understanding of history. Uh, I gotta stop there because I have limited time. Um, so, what about the persecutions of Christians and the story of early Christianity? So, So, according to, sorry about that, I just had a disturbance. According to Bart Ehrman's blog, the persecution go all the way back uh, to the Christian author Paul. Uh, I'm citing here, who must have converted to be a follower of Jesus just 3 years or so after Jesus did. But Paul tells us explicitly that before becoming a follower of Jesus, he was a persecutor of the church. And why was he persecuting it? He doesn't say directly, and this is what I'm saying this, but my sense is that it was for the very basic reason he despised their message. Specifically, he could not abide by what Christians were saying about Jesus. Why was that a problem? Because they insisted he was God's Messiah. And then I gonna ask, what about the Romans then? Why were the Christians prosecuted by the Romans? According to Britannica, Paul's success at Ephesus provoked a riot to defend the cult of the goddess Artemis. In 64 CE, a fire destroyed much of Rome, and in order to escape blame, the Emperor Nero killed a vast multitude of Christians as scapegoats. So they claimed that Paul was killed because, as a martyr, and that other Christians would be killed at this time as martyrs was not correct. It's because of political reasons. And then Nero also died before the story of James, brother of Jesus' martyrdom, was written down. And Nero died in 68 AD. Acts was written between 1790 AD. So we do have a development of oral tradition between 30 AD to 70 AD. This is explained by the refutation video by the actual original narrator, former first second sin. Uh, and this means that the legend of Jesus at this time goes unchecked. And this leads me to the Bible itself, right? In BAM sites iowa.edu, they ask how Apostle Peter and Paul died. And it cites Jesus' death, for example, is recorded 4 times in the New Testament, while Paul and the 12 remaining apostles, after Judas Iscariot, have none of their death recorded. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving. With the unknown and the history, can we rely on the Bible? Is my question. Now, um, let's talk about the tomb here, because according to John, he cites it that it was still dark. Others says it was at the break of daylight, and there's differences between how many women and which women were in the tomb. And only in Matthew will you hear about an earthquake by the angel, but and then Luke has 2 men in the tomb, the others have none. John skips the story of the angel in the tomb altogether. John adds a lot to the story after the tomb encounter, and John is the latest one of these four. Uh, I'm talking about John, Matthew, Luke, and Mark. Matthew had the God going in and reporting it to the chief priest in town, and only him had it. Luke claims the Son of Man must be delivered over the hands of sinners, be crucified, and be the third day raised again, and only him had it. So, where was the tomb? According to outside sources, it's in by Diane Galbraith. I had this article in Whence the Giant Jesus as his talking cross, the resurrection in the Gospel of Peter. It cites, while the resurrection of Jesus from the dead is arguably the most important component of early Christian confession, none of the New Testament Gospels provide us with narrative of that event. Uh, and according to the study by Mark D. Smith and Burial of the Crucified, new archaeological evidence suggesting that family burials could happen in ancient Rome, even for crucifixion victims. Sorry, I gotta rephrase that. So, what I tried to say here, according to the study by Mark D. Smith, Burial of the Crucified, new archaeological evidence, uh, it suggests that yes, even in Rome, a burial could happen for crucified victims. But the story of Jesus' burial is not known. John 19:41. It says, "At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid." And Matthew and the other three says, "And placed it in his own new tomb, and he had cut off the way of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance in the tomb and went away." So only John, again, the latest one, 19 to 95 AD written, was it written. And the Holy Sepulchre, built by Constantine 336 CE, well, the church was built around that site, right? Contributes this to John,
2 minutes
uh,
remain.
and he was the first Christian emperor, and this was long after Christianity was established. So so move to the witnesses then. The witnesses. So Mormons notably have witnesses too. But who witnessed the resurrection of Jesus other than Paul? Paul did not witness it firsthand. He wrote letters about it, but he did not witness it. He said he had a vision about him, but no, he says that there were 500 witnesses and sent it to Corinthian. Clement of Rome just recount what he says. Uh, so the witnesses that he claims cannot be confirmed. Um, so how are the visions explained? Well, today we know that hallucinations can happen because of multiple reasons: grief, uh, or guilt can cause these. And knowing Paul and who he was beforehand would give us a good understanding of what it was. Now, when it comes to the supernatural claims, uh, I would like to bring up the Shroud of Turin and say that the evidences in lifescience.com says that it carbon dates it back to 1260 to 1390 AD. But furthermore, the markings of blood of the shroud does not match up with the claims or the story of the crucifixion wounds of Jesus. Um, so I think I stopped there. I put through
Yeah,
all I wanted.
thanks. That's
Yeah,
just before time. So,
yeah.
so what we'll do now, guys, I'll just set the timer and then we'll go into the second round of open discussion. Reset.
Groovy, groovy. Thanks for that, Samuel. Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
guys.
Notice that I did not bring any claims from Muslims. So I hope you're happy about
Thanks
that.
God. Thanks God for that. Good on you. Good on you.
Guys, I'm ready when yous are. I'll
All
start
right.
the timer now.
Yeah. That's fine.
Right.
Thanks for that, Samuel. That was great. So, um, just one thing I want to cover off when we're talking about the early attestation of the resurrection. What Christianity also has is what's called, believe it or not, P64. Sounds like a German U-boat, but it's also called the Magdalene manuscript, and it's a small fragment of chapter 21 of Matthew's Gospel, and it was discovered in 1901. German archaeologists, paleographists, a New Testament scholar, Dr. Carsten Theede. I've probably butchered that, but it's spelled Thide. I think it's pronounced Theede, something like that. He's actually passed on now, but he was the director of the Institute of Basic Epistemological Research in Paderborn, Germany. Now, he dated these fragments from Matthew's Gospel. The fragments were written on both sides, and he dated the fragments using a scanner laser microscope to differentiate between 20 micrometers layers of papyrus, and this allowed for the measuring of the height and depth of the ink that was used, as well as the angle of the stylus used by the scribe. So Dr. Saidi also compared his findings with P64 with four other known manuscript fragments. Um, anyway, long story short is that based on the physical evidence, Dr. Saidi concluded that these portions of Matthew's Gospel were likely written by the disciple Matthew circa, which means, about 60 AD. And this is just 28 years after Christ had been resurrected from the dead, if in fact he was crucified in 32 AD. So P64, the Magdalene manuscript, provides very empirical evidence that the records of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection preserved for us in Matthew's Gospel today are accurate, reliable, and truthful. Any skeptical objection that the four Gospels were written at too great a time gap from the actual event is pretty much abolished by these fragments from P64. They show every indication of being actually written by the disciple Matthew while he was still alive. And even in the pre-Pauline Creed, the Apostle Paul, he says that Jesus appeared to individuals and small groups of people, plus a large group of over 500 people, most of whom are still living. These are his words. Most of whom are still living, though some have gone to sleep, which is a polite way of saying they've passed on. So it's almost like the Apostle Paul was inviting people to come to Jerusalem and talk to these eyewitnesses and verify what he was saying. So anyway, that's kind of the first thing I would want to talk about, because we've got early attestation, we've got enemy eyewitness accounts, and we've got individual accounts, and we've got group accounts, and trust me, group hallucinations don't happen. You'll never read of a group hallucination of 500 people having a hallucination, because the hallucination just happens in the mind of the individual. So I'll probably yield there and give you a chance to have a talk, Samuel.
Yeah, you said quite a lot. I mean, first off, again, those 500 witnesses, uh, again, nowhere to be seen. Most of the apostles, nowhere to be seen after Jesus' death. Talking about group hallucinations or not doesn't really matter, since it's all claimed from one guy, really. And even if it was, I mean, grief hallucinations happen quite frequently. How many of the one closest to Jesus experienced it, we still don't know. Uh, then the whole claim. My biggest problem is that the claims are made as evidence. Now, so the uh, the Magdalene manuscript. Who wrote it? What's in it? What says in it? Uh, Now I don't know, but women back in the day were kind of the outcast, the second-class citizen, and that's why Christianity was appealing to them. Uh, is and that's why the women were attested to be in the guarding the tomb. But to suggest that Magdalene could write, sure, but then again, Matthew was written 80 AD. So, and we don't know exactly what says in the Magdalene manuscript. And again, I just again want to point out that the four manuscripts, uh, sorry, the four gospels are not coherent with each other. When I read about the tomb, when I read about the burial, and I have not really studied the Bible in full, so I would like to know what else do they disagree upon. And of course, other people have studied this in depth and said that some are just blatant copies of each other, while some where they actually should correlate with each other, like these key points, are vastly different and adding to the supernatural claims over time. I mean, I excluded in my opening Peter, right? I know it's been excluded from the canonized scripture anyway, but he has a giant talking cross. How do we know that Maria Magdalene has nothing like that in her? Because again, I have not read it, and to me, it's just a claim that well, you have another manuscript. Uh, to me, these what we have justifies that this is too much of a, uh, accumulation of inconsistencies to not be taken seriously.
All right, my turn. My
Yeah,
turn.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool, cool. Thanks for that. All right, so a few things that I've jotted down. You made the claim that the apostles were nowhere to be seen after the crucifixion. So, what's the evidence for that, Samuel?
Yeah, I do think I have it linked in one of the uh, one of the citations I posted. Uh, I it's just it's just that it's not written about them in the Bible.
Well, if it's not written in the primary source evidence, where do you, what evidence do you use to make that claim?
Well, the problem is that there is nothing, there is nothing in the Bible that should be uh, where we can read about them, but also outside evidences. Well, if I'm gonna be charitable, all we can say is, well, they probably were, and the one Paul was talking about were probably the ones who got died off by Nero when he started slaughtering Christians because of the fire, right? But again, do we know anything about these people? No, we don't know what they witnessed, how they witnessed it, and we don't actually know what their faith was because they got killed not because they believed in Christianity, but because they were blamed by the fire.
No, that's not actually true.
All
Um,
right.
the Bible describes the apostles after the crucifixion and the resurrection, after having seen Christ come back from being seriously dead. The Bible describes the apostles as being all over, spreading the gospel like white on rice. It was only a short period of time, I think 50 days, between um, when Jesus was entombed to when the Holy Spirit came and landed on the followers of Christ, which is not a long time. And you've got Peter, you've got James, which is the stepbrother of Jesus. You've got all the disciples except Judas, all the
Yeah,
disciples
but
who
about
turned in. Hang on, you
uh,
can't overtalk me. You can have a go when I'm finished. You've got all the disciples who turned into apostles, and they were given the directive to spread the gospel to the four corners of all the earth. There are even female apostles. In Acts, the Bible talks about a lady called Junia, which is a female name, and she was an apostle. She was well accepted. So to say that the apostles were nowhere to be seen after the crucifixion is just factually wrong, according to the primary factual evidence in the Bible.
Mm, can I go now?
Yeah, yeah, go for
All
it.
right. Yeah. So about James, because James is assisted to John, written long after Paul's first letters, right? So that is also the like it's almost like a semi legend of James, and what he went been through is not really attested to the earliest manuscript. So, and the same can be said by the other uh, by the other uh, uh, followers of Jesus. The first ones we know to Paul is just claims, and then those apostles are added on in later on manuscripts. So what do we know about them? Well, the disciples, they have experiences that they thought that they saw a resurrected Jesus. Again, it goes back to the whole claim about uh, the apocalyptic Jews and the whole change of understanding of the Messiah and grief and all that, even if they were true, but we don't really know much about them yet. So they were nowhere to be seen. And when I say, well, they are not really mentioned, we don't know much about their life. It's true. All we know is that they later on manuscripts attribute saying, well, we saw this guy and we saw that guy, we talked that guy. But again, outside sources, not really. I mean, actually, know more about these people. All we have are a few handful. Um, I think there were 12 disciples of Jesus, right? Can we count for all 12 of them?
Yep, yep,
Oh, really?
yeah,
All right. Because according to Bart Ehrman, he says that they cannot be accounted for.
yeah. Well, Bart Ehrman likes to sell a lot of books, and that's really the
So I should
number
not
of.
trust Bart Ehrman's words.
Um, some of his stuff is good. Yeah, some of his stuff is good. Like Samuel, you believe that Jesus really existed, eh? Was a real person in the first century.
Well, to be honest, I don't want to go into that one because I'm going with the claim of resurrection only. If he existed or not, that's we can have that discussion another time. But
Um,
let's put it this way. Let's put it this way. If I go with Bart Ehrman and all the other scholars that talk about it, they go from the position that he did exist. So
yeah,
sure.
that's
Yeah,
fine. That's
yeah.
fine. Okay, so what was my last thought? My last thought was that um, yeah, I just reject this claim of the apostles were nowhere to be found because the New Testament is replete with news about the apostles, writings about the apostles, and Paul was not the first apostle, not by a long shot. Probably Peter was after denying Christ 3 times. Um, and we've got all the disciples who turned into apostles, and they all have a story. But what are these outside sources you're referring to? You talk about, you say things like, we don't really know much about the lives, or the Bible doesn't talk much about the lives of the apostles, but we know from outside sources what happened to them. So what are these outside sources you're talking about?
No, I said we don't really know if I'm charitable, but we can uh, conclude is probably, and this is just my speculation, is that they were probably killed off by prosecution by Nero in the earliest days of Christianity.
Um, 11 of them were martyred according to according to the Bible and according to church tradition. The only one who died a natural death was John, and I think it was 1898. He finally passed away from natural causes.
Mm,
So the rest of them um, all died as martyrs. And you, to die as a martyr, you've got to be pretty convinced of the cause that you're defending. Now, granted, some people can die for a cause that is not right. For example, the 9/11 terrorists, etc. But the Christians in the first century, especially the apostles, they believed they saw Christ, and it wasn't just one. It just wasn't just one time. It was multiple times, and he appeared to many different groups of people and individuals at different times of the day and on different days. It wasn't just one appearance. It was over a period of 40 days, and that's that's pretty strong. If someone comes back from the dead and hangs out with your crew for 40 days, that's pretty pretty strong, convincing evidence. Would you think?
point of moderation here. Sorry. Dwayne, can you kick this Mohammedan pedophile worshipper out of the room? Um, it kind of it kind of goes around and just uh, I don't know, trolls.
Say that again.
Uh, There's a guy named Nazgul Nazgul. His name is Farouk Mod from Malaysia, and I cannot focus on what Gavin's saying.
Yeah, no, get rid of that guy, Dwayne. He's special, but not in the positive way.
Yeah. Can you repeat your question, Gavin?
Um, I was saying, Samuel, that after Jesus resurrected, after he came back from the dead on that Sunday morning, his his followers, and the disciples and the apostles and his brother, they didn't just believe they saw him one time; they saw him many times. And Jesus appeared to individuals and small groups of people, plus a large group that Paul describes as being more than 500 people. And Jesus appeared to these different groups of people on different days and at different times. So that was over a period of 40 days, which is, over a month, which is a fair bit of time to to kind of prove that, yeah, you really have come back from the dead. Would you not think that's a fairly strong indication that he really was resurrected?
Well, so there's a okay. So two things here. There is a story about Lazarus, right? I didn't take it on with me on this debate, but since you bring it up, Lazarus was resurrected, and that again is attributed to the later scripture. I think it was by John. Uh, yeah, it was. And the claim is that he got resurrected by Jesus' hands. Why wasn't that in the beginning, right? Uh, Now again, the like Christianity is not the only religion out there that has eyewitnesses. Mormonism has eyewitnesses too that claims to have seen something supernatural. But with with the indication of the eyewitnesses, again, it's one guy claiming all these eyewitnesses, and uh, they are added more and more over time with it's just an what they call ad hoc, right? Like they're just adding on to it. Uh, if the witnesses were actually real, uh, I think more people would be able to uh, pose uh, their witnessing and spread the message than it was. Again, I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna say, well, Christianity was formed because, but again, it's the problem of that is because it was through political reasons that Christianity spread, and by why they were prosecuted was also because they detested, one, they detested the old Judaism, two, they detested the Roman Hellenism, right? And and but you can say is that prosecution make your faith stronger, and the narration of Jesus and the Messiah just grew over time. But when you actually look at what it says, the claims that go around the whole crucifixion, the claims about the tomb, uh, and the burial site and the empty tomb, it's a lot of discrepancies still. So the one okay, so let's put it very easily this way. One guy claiming 500 witnesses is a lot of difference than 500 witnesses claiming they saw one guy resurrect. Did I lose you, Gavin? Hello?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm going by torchlight here. Goodness me.
Did you
Yeah,
hear
you
my
made the
last
claim.
statement?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, all
I
right.
heard it. I heard everything. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So you made the claim that we can't really be sure that the person who wrote the accounts in the New Testament was a real person. Is that right?
What? No, no, no. Well, I didn't make that claim, and I actually think I would. No, no, that wouldn't be fair. No, I'm saying that Paul attributing the witnesses, right? We cannot know if those witnesses were real. That's what I'm saying.
What's the evidence that those witnesses might not be real?
Because there's nothing outside of Paul saying that.
Does there have to be?
Well, okay, Gavin, if I tell you that I saw 500 people witnessing a flying spaghetti monster, you would laugh at me.
Yeah, that doesn't really answer my question.
Well, but if to me it's the same thing, right? Because you again, let's put it in a perspective here. Apocalyptic Jews sprung out from Judaism, wanting something new. Jesus, if he was real now, he preached against Judaism. People started following him because they were tired of old Judaism. They wanted the Messiah. They had this idea of what it means to be resurrected by God's hand. They saw him already as a Messiah. So even if the people around him, which were not 500 people again, because again, the apostle is supposed to be 12, and when you talk about the closest people around him, wouldn't be 500 people anyway. But even if those people would be grieving, they would, uh, it would be reasonable to think that they would see hallucinations based on grief, and Paul, again, by grief or guilt. But then Paul is the only one, again, who claims all these other people. And I'm willing here to give him a couple of people, right? Right? The closest around Jesus. But what does it mean anyway? Because the the whole idea about who Jesus was already set before the death. So when I tell you, Gavin, that a flying spaghetti monster is ridiculous, uh, I have not established the idea of a spaghetti monster. like the idea of Jesus as the Messiah uh, has been done, and the whole concept of his divinity, uh, and the oral tradition uh, been spread over the years. I mean, it's close to 50, 60 years between Jesus' death and the last one, which is John, written down his gospel. Anyway, your mic.
Yeah, I don't know what that's got to do with anything. What is the evidence, Samuel, that uh, Jesus the Christ did not appear to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time? What's the evidence that he did not appear to 500 of the brothers and sisters?
Okay, see, you're doing this again, right? You're putting the blame on me, the evidence of burden on me, when you are making the claim. You say there is evidences. There are people who testify to this, and when we look for those people who testify to this, we can see that they linked back to one guy. So how is it my responsibility now to tell you the evidences they did not? How do you prove a negative? You can only prove a positive, Gavin.
You're making the claim that Jesus did not appear to more than 500 people, so you have the burden of proof to provide evidence that your claim is true.
All right. Well, that's funny. 500 people again. Do we have anybody but Paul telling 500 people seeing Jesus being resurrected? No, we don't. Do we have any Roman scripture? Do we have any Jewish scripture? No, we don't. I don't know. Do I really need more than that?
Um, we have we have Jewish and we have Roman scripture,
We do.
certainly attesting to the fact that Jesus' followers believed they saw him alive and well 3 days after he was crucified.
500 people.
No, 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 no. We have
That's what you. But that's the
Roman.
question, right?
No, no. Listen to me. You said we don't have any Roman or Jewish sources saying that Jesus did not
No,
resurrect.
no, that's not what I said. You asked
What
me
did
for
you
the
say?
500. You said for the 500 people. Where are the 500 people coming from, other than Paul?
Well, does it matter? Does it? Why
No,
does it
that's the
matter?
question. But that's the
Hang on,
question you
hold on,
asked
hold
me.
on, hold
That's
on. You
the
can't.
question you asked me.
Hold on, hold on. You can't. You can't. It's only one mic at a time. You can't. You can't just dismiss um, this claim of Jesus appearing to individuals and small groups of people, and on one occasion appearing to over 500 of the brothers and sisters. You can't just dismiss that because only Paul wrote that, because you have to have some evidence. Because saying that Paul only wrote that is not good evidence.
Yeah, is it my turn?
Yeah,
I don't
go,
want to
go for
overtalk.
it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the question asked me was about Paul and the 500 witnesses. But sure, if we're gonna expand, then yeah, let me go to Gary Haberman, 2150, in that video I linked. It was about I think his name is Apologia or something. But he says that they thought they saw the risen Jesus. The disciple had experiences that they thought were appearances of the risen Jesus, right? So yeah, we have, like you said, we have Roman and Jewish scripture that say that yes, they believe that they saw it. Now, do we have a reasonable understanding of this today? Yes, we do, right? But to say that 500 people saw him at once, no, we do not have it. Anybody else claiming that but Paul?
which means nothing. Which means nothing.
Well, to me, it means
Because this
everything.
this this pre-Pauline Creed, I'll read it to you. It's very short. Remember, this was in wide circulation in Jerusalem as little as a few months after the resurrection, or as atheist New Testament scholar Gerd Ludemann says, no more than 2 to 3 years after the um, resurrection. So this is what the pre-Pauline Creed says. It says that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas. Cephas is just Aramaic for Peter, and then to the 12, meaning the 12 disciples. After that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep, which means some have passed on. But most of them, the bulk of them, are still alive. Then he appeared to James, that's Jesus' half brother, and then to all the apostles. So that's the pre-Pauline Creed, and that was in wide circulation in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, um, either some months after the resurrection, but no later. No later, according to Gerd Ludemann, an atheist New Testament scholar, no later than 3 years after the event.
Right,
Your
right.
mic,
So
your
you,
mic, your mic.
thank you, thank you, thank you. So you just uh, re reiterated. I'm saying that right. Um, you just established Paul's letter uh, to Corinthians over and over again, right? It all comes back to Paul. It doesn't matter if an atheist scholar talks about it, if it comes down to attribute to Paul's letter to Corinthians over and over again, and which is dated 50 to 51 AD anyway. Uh, so that doesn't really matter how else you try to go around it. The claim is made by Paul, and to me, the claim is not sufficient because we don't have anybody else claiming that but Paul. Paul wrote the letter, and yes, then it circulated, but he wrote it to the people who believed in it already, and then it's just added on to that. It's not very hard to see why it spread after that. Uh, I mean, I don't want to be mean here, but it almost sounds like Muhammad going to the cave saying, I witnessed this, uh, and therefore you have to listen to me. And everybody else who then, believed in him started to follow him and believe what he says. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about this.
So, what makes you think that Paul, the Apostle Paul, wrote this? Now, listen to this carefully. What makes you think Paul wrote this pre-Pauline Creed that was in wide circulation some months, uh, but could have been in wide circulation maybe 3 years after the resurrection? Why do you think Paul wrote this creed?
Because it's his words.
No, no. Listen to this. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 15, right at the beginning. Paul says, Now, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received and on which you have taken your stand. By the gospel you are saved. If you firmly, sorry, if you hold firmly to the word I preached to you, otherwise you have believed in vain. For what I received, Paul saying, for what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance. That's why it's called a pre Pauline Creed, because it was in wide circulation before Paul even came on the scene.
Okay, okay, but it's attributed. Okay, What did he receive?
He received this pre-Pauline creed that I've just read to you.
No, no. What did he receive? What exactly? Because it just says I received. Uh,
Yeah.
I give to you what I received, right? So what did he receive?
Now it says, "For what I received," this is the exact words, "for what I received, I being Paul, for what I received, I passed on to you
Yeah.
as of first importance." The you is the Christians and Gentiles in the church in Corinth. And Paul
What
is
did
saying,
he?
"For what?" Hmm?
What did he receive?
He received this pre Pauline creed that had been in wide circulation before he even came on the scene.
What? No, I don't understand this. That's just yeah, you're gonna explain this in detail. To me it sounds like when he says what I received is just that he received the gospel or the narration of Jesus, and then he wants to spread it further. Not that he actually received a letter that he then pass on. He is the one attributed to the first letters, right?
No,
You
that's
have
not right.
seven. Okay, so you have 7 or 13 letters, right? The 7 that are authentic and were the first ones to be passed on to the Clement of Rome, to the letters of Corinthians, right? That's these are the first earliest documents of biblical history. Isn't that correct?
No, no, that's not
No.
correct. No.
Hmm.
So you know, you, because you've done your homework, and I think you've done some good research. You would know that Paul spent a couple of weeks with the apostles James and Peter, right?
Yeah, but again, that's okay. So that's the problem, right? That's a claim again. Um, and
How,
since you're
how,
talking about James and
how can it
Peter,
be a claim? How can it be a claim when I'm using the Bible as the primary source
that's
evidence?
exactly the problem because yeah, that's exactly a problem because somebody claims it, then it must be true. And by the way, Peter and James do not attribute to the 500 witnesses.
That's that's neither here nor there. Neither here nor
All
there.
right.
And this debate is not about whether the Bible is true or not. This debate is about the resurrection. So
Yeah.
Paul spent 2 weeks with the apostles Peter and James, and Paul says, "For what I received, I passed on to you, you Christians and Gentiles and Jews at Corinth.
Mm.
And I passed on to you as of first importance that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures." So Paul is passing on what was given to him. Um, Most scholars just infer that it was uh, Peter and James
Mhm.
that gave this pre-Pauline creed to Paul, but it certainly wasn't something he dreamed up himself. The pre-Pauline creed is not attributed to Paul, hence that's why it's called a pre, as in before, Paul, pre-Pauline creed.
Guys, you have
All right.
2 minutes, so I don't know if you just want to round it up.
All right. Well, I have a question for you, Gavin.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in which book, in which gospel do we get that Paul and James and Peter uh, spent time with Paul?
In Acts, in the book of Acts.
The book of Acts. And the book of Acts was written after Mark, right?
Uh, Not long after, I think, but I think it was after.
So again, that goes with my criticism that the more time that goes, the more things are added in. So let's just say that it's true that he met Peter and James. Did they write anything? Because the Gospel of Peter uh, is not taken as valid. The Gospel of James, do we have it? I don't know. In my research I didn't come across it. But then we have you know, again, like, if they say something uh, to Paul, and he hears it, and then uh, he um, he has it given to him, like he says, right? What is given to me, I now give to you. It just stands to reason that this is what he has given, and then he wants to spread the word, and not really something extraordinary here. But yeah, to the point that, we're not talking about the Bible is true or not. The problem here is that the claim of the Bible is taken as true, even though there's discrepancy in it enough to start to question this. Go ahead.
Um, yeah, yeah, we're kind of running out of time. Wish we had more time. Um,
Yeah, guys, I don't know if you just want to round it up there.
You
yeah,
can give Gavin some time. I spoke a lot.
maybe another 10 minutes or so. So it is true that Paul spent 2 weeks with Peter and James because Luke writes about it in Acts, in the book of Acts, and I'm sure that Paul had a million questions for Peter and James, but this spending time with these two apostles fits in so nicely with what Paul's saying. For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance. Now, any sane person would think, well, he's received something from somebody or something, and going to spend a couple of weeks with Peter and James would seem to fit quite well with that. But I've got a question for you, and we're probably going to have to wind it up after this. But with the biggest problem atheists have with the resurrection and with the Bible is the fact that there are supernatural events regarding the resurrection of Christ. It's a supernatural event because it's not every day that a dead guy comes back to life. And, the atheists will say, look, there's no evidence of supernatural events. Well, that's actually not true. Um, and, the ancient writings of Herodotus, Philo of Alexandria, Suetonius, Tacitus, you know, these were writings that were written well before the Gospels, and they have accounts of supernatural events, but nobody complains about the description of these supernatural events in these writings. It's only the Gospels, it's only the Bible that atheists seem to have this huge problem with. Why don't atheists say, oh, look, the writings of Herodotus, Philo of Alexandria, and Suetonius and Tacitus, that's all bunkum. It's all bunkum what they were saying about the supernatural events. But we don't hear that. We don't hear that. So why is that, Samuel?
Well, are people running around and saying that those scriptures are true?
Nobody denies, no historian denies that they aren't true.
There. Well, hold on. So, what exactly are the supernatural in those books? I haven't read them, so you gotta tell me.
Well, they're supernatural events where the laws of logic are suspended temporarily and a miraculous event or supernatural event is inserted in that time space where logic has been suspended.
Yeah, I'm sure if people bring it up, the people will have a problem with it. But yeah, maybe it's just not a known scripture. Just vastly accepted, like the resurrection of Jesus, for example. Um,
Well,
I
they're
mean,
not
if
scriptures.
you're gonna go back in time, then of course you have other gods, that
Yeah,
were
these aren't
supernatural.
scriptures. These aren't scriptures, Samuel. They're histories,
Well,
like Swatan, like
that's
Sweet.
kind of biased, don't you think?
What?
Isn't that biased?
How do you mean biased? What's biased um
Well,
about writing about the history of the Greeks or the Jews or the Romans? What's biased about that?
no, no, but I mean, if you're gonna say, well, it's just ancient history and it happened and it was not supernatural, then you say, well, Christianity is true because of a supernatural effect.
I don't even know what you mean by that. Let's be clear. The writings of Herodotus, Philo of Alexandria, Suetonius, and Tacitus all have events in them that can only be described as supernatural. But you'll never hear an atheist critique or criticize those events.
Well, again, do people
It's
believe in them?
only it's only the Bible. It's only the Bible that atheists go after.
Yeah, but do people believe in those today?
Sorry?
Do people believe in those scriptures today?
They're not scriptures, Samuel. They're histories.
Well, yeah, stories, fables, whatever you want to call it.
They're not stories. They're not fables. My goodness. They are historical accounts.
Okay, do people believe in those historical accounts?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, they do.
Okay, so what historical supernatural effect happens in those books that is
No,
taken
no,
as
no,
true?
no, 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 no. We're not going to go down that road because what
Well,
you're
you
looking
asked
for
me.
now
You the one who
is
asked me.
pinhole objections. You're looking for
Yeah,
what's
no,
called
no, no,
pinhole
but it's an
objections.
important one. It's you asked me this. I think okay, so make it short. I think the reason why people focus on Christianity is because it's the biggest religion today, and people make the most claims about it. I think that's the simplest answer you're gonna get.
So it still doesn't answer my question though. That, like for instance, Tacitus wrote volumes on Greek histories. Suetonius did volumes on Roman histories, and Herodotus. I mean, man, he was ancient. He was writing between 480 and 425 BC. BC. Um, and nobody questions the supernatural events that they write about. They don't write like there's not a supernatural event on every third page. It's pretty rare, you know. It's very
Yeah, but
rare.
again, Gavin, I gotta know what you're talking about, right? Like I'm going in deep water. I don't even know. That's why I'm asking. What exactly? I'm pretty sure that an atheist, if he heard a supernatural claim that wasn't true, he would contest that and ask, does it hold up, right? He would like, all right, so let's say Zeus made it rain. They would be like, did he really, right? Stuff like that. But nobody. That's why I'm saying, like, do people actually believe in the? And then you say it's ancient history, and in history is sprinkled with supernatural events. Nobody questions. I'm pretty sure that if I knew what you're talking about, I would be able to give you more feedback. But I really don't at the moment.
Oh well, I don't suppose we can sort of go
Good
much
time to
further
wrap it
than
up,
that.
guys.
Yeah, we got any questions, Diane?
No, there's no questions came in, so
Oh man, we must have done
There's
such a good
nobody who's
job.
there's nobody looking at the screen, man. There's nobody listening to us.
but
There's no one in the audience.
No,
quite an
Oh my
amicable
goodness.
debate, guys. So thank you. Made my job easy.
Yeah, you had an easy job, man. Thanks,
yeah,
Samuel. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. It was a good discussion.
yeah. It was a nice discussion. It was nice. It was more of a discussion than debate, I would say. Yeah,
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was good though.
yeah. But
Well,
So
we can do
on
it.
that note,
We
guys,
can do it again, Samuel, sometime if you wanna debate something, anything to
yeah,
do with
we
God or the
can we can talk
Bible.
about something. Um, there are more things. in the future we can talk about. But
Yeah.
it just sucks that not too many people came in and watched this.
Hopefully, people will
Yeah.
Maybe
rewatch
people
it.
will watch it afterwards.
I think a lot of people are going to watch replays, Samuel, because I know, for example, people on the east coast of the USA, when we started at 10 a.m. your time, it was 4 a.m. in the morning for them. So they're likely to be asleep.
Yeah. Well, guys, hopefully we'll hold another debate between you two. So we'll end it on that note. And
That'll be cool.
thanks, guys. Anyway, so we'll end it on
Yeah.
that note. God bless.
Thanks, Samuel. Thanks,
All
Samuel.
right.
Good discussion.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Bye,
Same.
guys.
Right.
God
Take care.
bless.
Have a
God
nice
bless.
day.